And I'd first like to say thanks to both Everett, Wess, and Dakarai, Larriett for being willing to do this. And I know that this will only spread good information to all of our listeners out there. So Everett, Wess, if you'll take it away with your initial statement, please.
All right. Good evening, Alabamians. My name is Everett Wess, and I'm proud to stand before you as a Democratic candidate for the United States Senate from Alabama. I am a lifelong advocate for working families, a public servant, an attorney, a former judge, and a Democrat who has spent more than 30 years supporting Democratic values and Democratic candidates throughout the state. Over the course of my career, I have remained rooted right here in Alabama, fighting for justice, protecting constitutional rights, and helping communities that are too often overlooked and underserved. My record speaks for itself. I have served 2 terms on the Jefferson County Democratic Executive Committee. I've served 8 years as president and vice president of Alabama New South. Today, I am the state president of Alabama New South Coalition. For more than a decade, I've served on the Criminal Justice Act panel in North Alabama, helping ensure that every citizen receives fair representation regardless of income. I also served on the Jefferson County Indigent Defense Board, working to make our justice system more equitable and accessible. So as a result of that, we have the Public Defender's Office here in Jefferson County, Alabama, to represent people who cannot pay for an attorney. For nearly 26 years, I served Alabama as an attorney, a public servant, and a judge. My commitment to service extends beyond the courtroom. I currently serve on the board for Child Haven, which is a residential home for adolescent young ladies, and it gives them a safe, supportive environment where they can build a brighter future. I also serve on the board for Legacy Works, right here in Birmingham, Alabama, which provides mentorship for at-risk inner-city young men. And I remain active in my church as a Sunday school teacher. But today is not just about my record. Today is about Alabama's future. As I travel across our state, teachers, healthcare professionals, business owners, seniors, and working families have concerns. These concerns have shaped my platform and my priorities for the United States Senate. So first, we must address rising costs of living and stabilize the job market. Families throughout Alabama are struggling with inflation, housing costs, high gas bills, high utility bills, and these everyday expenses. Seniors are on fixed incomes. Young families and even college graduates are feeling the pressure. We need policies that support higher wages, stronger economic opportunities, and tax relief for working people. That includes supporting efforts to eliminate the grocery tax, protect tip income, reduce taxes on overtime pay, and make it easier for hardworking Alabamians to keep more of what they earn. Then we must invest in education. I'm a product of the Pell Grant. We need to support our Department of Education and make sure that students have an opportunity to go to college on grants and student loans so that we can have young people who have an opportunity to be successful in this country. At the federal level, I will fight for investment that helps Alabama students succeed from early childhood education through college and workforce training. Then we must work on affordable health care for rural Alabama and for veterans. Folks in Alabama, they're struggling to survive. Too many Alabamians are driving long distances to receive basic medical care. I will work with the healthcare leaders, hospital administrators, and federal agencies to strengthen rural healthcare and veteran systems and bring more resources into underserved communities. We must continue to rebuild Alabama's infrastructure. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act created opportunities to improve transportation, broadband access, water systems, and energy infrastructure. I will work to ensure Alabama receives its fair share of federal funding so that every community can benefit from economic growth and job creation. Finally, we must confront the burden of rising utility bills and gas bills again. Many Alabamians feel frustrated and financially squeezed by some of the highest utility and gas costs in the nation. I will work with policymakers and regulators to promote greater transparency, accountability, and consumer protection so families are treated fairly. My campaign is not about division. It is not about personal attacks. It's about solutions. It's about putting Alabama families first. It's about creating opportunities for our children, protecting our seniors, strengthening our economy, and ensuring every Alabamian has a voice in Washington. So on June 16th, I respectfully ask for your vote. Vote for experience, vote for leadership, vote for someone who has spent decades serving Alabama and fighting for his people. Vote Everett Wess for United States Senate, a proven Democrat, a tested leader, a fighter for Alabama. Thank you, and God bless Alabama.
Well, thank you, Everett, and you timed that very well. So well done. So now, Dakarai, if you will go next and go right ahead.
Well, good evening, everyone. Good evening, Chris and Debbie, Birmingham Indivisible, and Alabama. Thank you so much for having us for this important forum. The truth is, so much is at stake this November, and we've got to get June 16th right. We can and we must nominate a fighter, a Democratic fighter for United States Senate, someone who represents our values, someone who takes reproductive health seriously, someone who knows the moment that we're in and will fight like hell for voting rights and will not at all support the SAVE Act. Too much is at risk. Education, healthcare, our democracy, our way of life. My name is Dakarai Larriett. I am a born and raised Alabamian, lifelong Democrat, and I love this state. And I want to see us all do better. My mom is a teacher and my dad served in the Army, and I grew up all over the world, but back here in Birmingham, I excelled in school and graduated from University of Alabama with honors. But I could not find work in the state of Alabama. So that led me to New York City, where I built a very impressive career in supply chain. I started my own businesses. I earned my MBA from the NYU Stern School of Business. But I found my passion in serving my community. When I got to New York, I started volunteering at the Bronx Community Pride Center, caring for our unhoused LGBT youth in the South Bronx, fighting the HIV epidemic. I then moved into harm reduction, addressing the opioid crisis as a senior leader at the National Harm Reduction Coalition. I moved back to Alabama and found my heart here and decided to stay during the pandemic, and I did the same thing. I got into service. I started driving for Meals on Wheels, helping our animals at the Humane Society, and I won my very first election, HOA president. And, and truly, you all, politics is local. Being HOA president of a very large development in downtown Birmingham allowed me to build relationships with the mayor's office, with the city council, the Department of Buildings, getting things done for my neighbors. Now, most recently, my decision to run was really born out of a road trip in 2024. And sadly, I was driving through the state of Michigan. I was apprehended by the Michigan State Police, tortured, and my driver's license was confiscated. And I've been fighting for justice ever since that day. I've written my own legislation, the Motorist Bill of Rights, which you can view on my website. I've spoken at the Alabama State House, and I have met thousands of you throughout the state, and I've been listening. And it's not just our criminal justice system that is broken, it's all of the systems. It's education, it's healthcare, it's the economy. And that became the foundation of this campaign, investing in us so that we can all excel. So education is the first pillar. We have to start now. It breaks the poverty cycle. We've got to ensure that everyone gets a quality education, just like I did. I was very blessed because my mom is an educator. But how do we ensure that everyone gets a quality public school education in our state and that college is affordable? I graduated from University of Alabama with possibility, not debt. I am campaigning on a strong Department of Education that is run by a professional teacher, not a professional wrestler like Linda McMahon. Healthcare. You can't do anything when you're sick. So, same thing. I will not confirm unqualified people to lead our healthcare system like Robert F. Kennedy. I am going to fight for Medicaid and Medicare expansion. I'm going to address the healthcare deserts throughout our state, as well as fight for reproductive freedom. In fact, I actually traveled up to Washington 4 times last year. One of those times was during the big, beautiful bill debate, and I stood shoulder to shoulder with Representative Maxine Waters, and I said no to that bill, which steals from our healthcare and gives paybacks to the billionaires and the corporations. And finally, economic opportunity. Too many Alabamians are being left behind. I will fight for legislation that protects Social Security, that ensures that we have great infrastructure so that folks can get to work, and ensures that we all get an opportunity through job training programs. I will also fight to ensure that the president stops abusing tariffs. Tariffs are not in the purview or the powers of the executive branch. And the president's abuse of tariffs have driven up our food costs as well as our housing costs. So these are the things that I will fight for every single day as United States Senator. I thank you for your time today. I'm asking for your support, your prayers, and your vote on June 16th.
Thank you very much. Thanks to both of you for that. You mentioned, Dakarai, I want to go back to both of you, but you mentioned that you would not support the SAVE Act, which the president has been trying to wrangle the Senate to actually to get rid of the filibuster in order to pass. But if you recall, actually, there is 2 other bills, the John Lewis Voting Rights and the Freedom to Vote Act. If you are elected to the Senate, would you support both of those if they came to the Senate for passage?
I think we need to relook at everything, Chris. So, in fact, what I learned over the last month is that we have such a corrupt kangaroo court that they will strike down bipartisan law. So we need to actually start looking at amendments to our Constitution that sit up here so that they cannot say that a law that was signed by both sides in 1965 is unconstitutional. So I don't even know if laws will protect us, frankly, at this point. We've got to make constitutional amendments.
Gotcha. Everett, how about you regarding both the SAVE Act, which is up there, and the other possibilities for strengthening voting rights?
I do not support the SAVE Act and do not believe that we should disenfranchise voters in our state and in our country. We've seen this in the past. There's been the literacy test, there's been the poll tax, and this is just the 2026 version of individuals who are politicians who are trying to disenfranchise voters. In the state of Alabama, we already show ID in voting, and I don't think anybody really has a problem with ID. I was down in Mobile at a forum with Representative Shamari Figures, and he asked how many show their ID when they vote. Everybody raised their hand, and do you really have a problem with it? No. So, I came up with this idea, and I don't think the SAVE Act would have ever been passed if this idea was implemented. And I said this in one of my speeches that, we should get the federal government, Congress will provide spending and a voter ID for every citizen in the United States. And Alabama would not be able to remove you from the voting rolls if you have that federal ID. That keeps the state from taking people off of the voting rolls. That keeps that, whether you change your name, whether you get married, no matter what, as long as you have that federal voter ID, you can go vote, and the state of Alabama nor anyone else could ever remove you from the voting rolls. So I am for voters not being disenfranchised and for voters being able to vote. And I would like to look at legislation where you can register to vote the day of. If you're a citizen of the United States, you should be able to vote.
Yeah, or even automatic voter registration. I think that's like the Freedom to Vote Act.
Right.
So, your idea about the federal ID, well, I assume that would be at no cost to individuals.
Paid for by spending allocated by Congress.
Yeah.
Paid for by Congress, overseen by Congress. Everybody gets a federal ID.
Yep. Dakarai, what do you think about that idea? Is that something that think would eliminate some of the negative misinformation that's being circulated about voting in the country?
I think we have to be careful because I think we started the discussion talking about the SAVE Act, and the SAVE Act is truly a solution in search of a problem. We know that voter fraud is so negligible in our country, which is a real blessing, right? We have protections and laws in place already. So I am reticent to create more confusion and layers of federal involvement in the process. I think having the states drive the process has saved us, frankly, the last couple of cycles. And truly, again, going back to the question, the SAVE Act is a disenfranchisement law, it is a poll tax, and it is unnecessary given the dynamics of voting in our country.
Okay. I want to switch just for 1 second to campaign finance. I noticed, Dakarai, that you are not taking PAC money or dark money. So are all of your contributions individual and small business contributions?
Well, to clarify, I am not accepting APAC money. And the overall commitment to the voters and to the public is I won't accept money from entities or people that I'm misaligned with. So that's the broad statement. As of now, our average donation is $30 and they're individual contributors.
Okay. How about you, Everett, as far as campaign contributions?
My contributions are from citizens, small contributions, and I mostly finance the campaign with my own funds. So I've not received any PAC money or any funds from anyone that do not have Democratic Party principles.
Okay.
And I'll continue to do so.
So I think both of you, looking at statements off of your websites, are talking about economic development and the fact that people in Alabama, but really all over the country, are suffering from this affordability crisis. They're hurting economically. And I'm curious about the minimum wage. That's something that always seems to bounce around. Let's start with you, Everett, since you were speaking last. How do you feel about having raising the federal minimum wage?
I believe that it's time for Congress to look at raising the nationwide minimum wage. So in Alabama, it's been where it is for I guess since I was in college, maybe. So we need to raise it. We need to look at raising it. So I'm a proponent of us having a fair wage. Also, in my opening statement, I talked about, not taxing overtime. That's something we need to look at. Not taxing tips for servers. That's something we need to look at. So, we need to make life affordable for citizens, especially the citizens here in Alabama.
And Dakarai, your thoughts on that, on the minimum wage, the federal minimum wage?
I believe the Alabamians deserve a pay raise. It has been far too long. And of course, here in Alabama, we don't have a minimum wage, so we are pegged to the federal. So $7.25, which is not much more than what I earned in high school 30 years ago. So what I propose is we relook at what that federal minimum wage needs to be, and then we peg further increases to inflation, because we're stuck in this cycle where the Congress is not revisiting the minimum wage but every 10, 15 years, and then it gets stuck at this artificially low number. So I think that from an accountability standpoint, we've got to peg it to inflation, which is quite high these days, and ensure that Alabamians and Americans get a pay raise.
Excellent. Yep. So Debbie has a question from the chat that she's going to read.
Right. We have several, but this one is for both of you. How would you protect the LGBTQIA, especially the transgender youth in Alabama?
Everett, if you want to go first, since you're unmuted, Dakarai's been muting, and then Dakarai.
I will parallel the protections, right alongside the protections that we have in civil rights for African Americans, for women. I will make sure that the LGBTQ community, the African American community, women, brown people, red, yellow, black and white, are protected, and I will make sure that everyone is treated fairly, no one is discriminated against, and we are all God's children. He made all of us. We're made in His image, and I think we deserve to treat each other with respect. And as your next United States Senator, I will make sure that all men are treated equal, because we're all created by God.
Okay, thank you, Dakarai.
Well, thank you for the question. I think it's very salient given that it's Pride Month. So happy Pride, everybody. So my life's work has been in advocating for marginalized communities. And in my corporate roles, I worked at companies like Louis Vuitton, Whirlpool, L'Oreal. I regularly took leadership roles. In fact, at Whirlpool, I led the Pride Employee Resource Group and worked hand in hand with HRC, the Human Rights Campaign, to ensure that we brought best practices into the workplace. And so I would continue that same pattern of creating partnerships, helping industry, helping the public understand the importance of equality in everyday life and how it ultimately makes the pie bigger for everyone. And I led so many different initiatives. One of them was allowing trans folks to use their chosen name. Imagine you're working in a factory and now you identify as John, but your legal name is Jane. How humiliating would that be to have to wear that legal name badge? So that was an initiative I led at Whirlpool Corporation. Bathroom access. So it's a very sensitive issue. You're working on the floor in the plant. You want to be able to use the restroom. You should be able to use the restroom. So I have a very intimate experience in this space, working in corporate environments, working in manufacturing environments that may not be the most progressive, and helping people understand the importance of equality. So it's through legislation, but it's also through the bully pulpit and leading by example, building a diverse team. So whenever I build a team, such as my campaign team, I seek out diverse individuals of all ages, races, sexual orientations to ensure that I don't have any blind spots as well.
Very good. So staying with you, Dakarai, for just a second, you mentioned in your opening, I believe, about the rights of women that have been seriously trampled on by the Supreme Court Dobbs decision, and then actions by state legislatures. My gosh, I think Alabama might be one of the worst from the standpoint of clamping down on the rights of women to control their own bodies. What are your thoughts on perhaps legislation that would codify the kind of standard that Roe v. Wade offered?
Yes, it's a must, but we have to be so realistic with the voters that this is a multi-year approach. It took multiple years for these MAGA extremists to take away the rights of women and their bodily autonomy. It's going to take us some time. We've got to build our lead in the House and in the Senate. So we have to flip 4 critical seats in the Senate to get to that 51, which means that we have our gavels, we can control the agenda, we can subpoena people, we can hold Robert F. Kennedy, for example, accountable and drag him up to the Capitol. But we still got to keep working until we get to that 60 so we can pass substantial civil rights legislation. That's where the fun starts, but it's going to take some work. It means that we have to get behind and support a very strong presidential candidate in 2028. So this is a multi-year approach. It's going to take strategy. But in the meantime, yes, we have to start writing that legislation. And, we can also start to pass piecemeal legislation where we can get that 60 votes over the finish line. Sometimes you can't just wait for that big PRO Act or something to get over the fence. Maybe you do it piece by piece. So we're going to approach this from many different angles to ensure that we protect our women and their bodily autonomy.
Thank you for that. Everett, how about you? The same point.
Yeah, I was looking at the Dobbs decision a little bit earlier, and basically, they rule that there's no constitutional right and it's left up to the states. And then I looked, and California, they went to work. The state of California went to work. They passed Proposition 1. They sent it out to the voters. The voter voted on it. It's enshrined in their constitution, where women are protected, where doctors are protected, where families are protected, where people who come from out of state are protected. But the people stood up in California. We as politicians, need to do our part at the federal level, but Alabama voters, we got to do our part as well and stand up and vote for legislators, state representatives, and senators who will stand up for the rights of women, for families, for their doctors, just as California did. So I'm willing to stand up for the people of Alabama, but I'm also asking the people of Alabama, let's rise up and get out, let our voices be heard on the 16th and on June the 16th and November the 3rd, so that we can make a change, make a difference in this state and in this country.
Well, and on that same point, and Dakarai was mentioning about building to 60 votes, but what is your thought about actually doing away with the filibuster? Because if you had 52 votes or 51 votes, you could pass some legislation that you can't pass right now because of the filibuster. Everett, what about you? Just quickly on the filibuster.
When you asked me that question, I thought about Cory Booker, standing up all night, giving a speech, unable to leave the podium, and the filibuster worked fairly well in that instance, and we got a message. He made his points. So, when the Republicans are in charge, we want to get rid of the filibuster. When the Democrats are in charge, we want to get rid of the filibuster. I think it's a tool that's been there for some time, and I think it's a good tool, and it allows individuals such as what Cory Booker did to make statements to the community, to the society throughout the United States of America.
Okay, thank you. Dakarai, how about you on the filibuster? You have another one to read? Mm-hmm.
I think that there's a very storied past to the filibuster, and there are certainly some highlights to it in protecting us from laws like the SAVE Act, in that MAGA extremist laws just can't get the 60 required votes. But at the same time, and very sadly, critical civil rights laws can't make it over the fence either, such as the PRO Act, which is a piece of legislation that I do wish to champion in the Senate. So for me, at the moment, given the polarized nature of our country, given the MAGA extremists, given the Supreme Court, I defer to harm reduction. And what that means is we're not going to get all of the progressive legislation we want, but we also won't have the devastating democracy-ending legislation like the SAVE Act come through.
Okay. We have a question from the chat, Debbie.
This is for both of you. What would you do? As a congressperson, what would you work toward that would benefit Alabama and its citizens? Something in particular.
Yeah, Dakarai, you go first this time, if you will.
So the first pillar of my campaign is education. And I like to say I'm an Alabama education success story. My mom invested in me. And if you back up 40 years, because this is a long story, my grandfather attended a 3-room Rosenwald school in Prattville, but he invested in my mom. And then from there, she was able to go to Alabama State, and she met my dad. And that's how education works. So we are being left behind because of that fundamental issue, and that we don't invest in education, we don't support our teachers, teacher pay is poor. So I am really campaigning on a strong Department of Education that holds the state of Alabama accountable in a way that our state leaders have not been able to do so themselves. So that is an investment, and we've got to start making that investment immediately if we want to develop a sustainable society. future leaders. And I think about not just that, but the long-term picture. I think about public safety. I attended a forum here in Birmingham where our mayor Woodfin spoke about the crime issues that we're looking to address here. And he said, when you put young men in particular into a scenario where they're not being educated and they're not getting economic opportunity, the back end is crime. So we think about our crime throughout the state. We think about the gun violence. A lot of that is a result of poor education and economic opportunity. So I want to really focus on fixing that front end and do that from a federal standpoint.
Thank you, Everett. What about you?
I think it goes back to my platform. You know, I talk about safe communities. Two ways to do that is to have quality public education, to allow financial funds for students to attend college. I had the Basic Education Opportunity Grant, also known as the Pell Grant, and that helped me get through college in part. And that's why, you know, now I have a music education degree, a computer science, mathematics degree, an MBA, and then a Juris Doctorate from law school. I worked in different fields. I worked in the space and defense industry in Huntsville for more than 10 years. And I've been a lawyer now for more than 26 years. I've been a judge for 8 years, a prosecutor for 5 years, and a public defender for 5 years. All of that is due to a quality public education, job stability. I remember when the Doge cuts first came down in Huntsville, Alabama, people were uncertain, and that affected families, mortgages, rent, food, children in college. Some people were laid off if they had not been employed by the federal government for 90 days. Some were forced to take early retirement or they would lose our job. We need, if Congress, if the Senate provides funding and oversight, we should make sure that funding is used for what we intended. And then there's rural health care, and veteran health care is real big in my platform. My dad was a veteran. He went to the veteran hospital in his last days when he was dying of cancer. He is buried at a veteran cemetery. And then we have, as I said in my opening statement, it takes too long for some people to be able to get to a doctor or a hospital in rural Alabama. Maybe we can combine medical providers, medical shops in rural Alabama and for veterans, you know, at the same time, and just provide that funding and make sure that our veterans are taken care of because they took care of us, and make sure that those who are in rural areas are taken care of with doctors, nurses, and social workers.
Thank you for that. So here, you know, this is almost like an appetizer because we could keep going for a long time here, but we're already at 35 minutes past the hour. So I have one other question for each of you, and then I'd like to go back to each of you just to, you know, make a closing statement, and perhaps you then point people who have further questions to your website or to the campaign if they want to drill a little deeper, which would be a good thing. So one of the things I think you were just talking about, Everett, the Congress, but that's House and Senate at the federal level right now, seems to have essentially surrendered their Article 1 powers to the president. And really, there's a long trend of that, not just Republicans, even though they're doing it right now. For example, there was a war powers resolution that just got voted down in the Senate that would have limited the ability of the president to declare war without going to Congress. Do you see a need, let's start with you, Everett, and then Dakarai, to rein back in the Article 2 power and reclaim it for the Congress of the United States?
So this is why the people of Alabama need to vote for Everett Wess as your next United States Senator so that we can balance those numbers and get back to what the Constitution intended. War powers, I mean, I have a copy of the Constitution right here. Mm-hmm. War power lies with Congress. You know, spending, oversight, the departments lies with Congress. I don't think, you know, we got people out here who are hungry, who need education, who are sick, and we're spending money on reflective pools and there's an arena on the White House lawn, and now we've asked Congress for $1 billion to build a ballroom. There's no forethought about the people of this country, the people of Alabama. And I will put people first and make sure that spending and oversight occurs in the way that the Constitution intended.
Thank you. And Dakarai, what about you on that reclaiming the power in the War Powers Act?
Yes. So I think the last 10 years, frankly, has been a case study in the importance of codifying our values and expectations. And frankly, we were operating in a world pre-2016, pre-Donald Trump, where we followed norms and traditions and we disagreed on policy, but we largely maintained decency. So I think we sit down as a Congress and we look at all of the branches. So our Supreme Court is out of control, right? It is not functioning and interpreting the law faithfully. We look at the executive branch. So no one would have thought of a president renaming the Kennedy Center. Doge was unauthorized. So while we want government efficiency, you don't get to lay off hundreds of thousands of federal workers and stop shipping critical HIV medication and food and things of this nature. And all of the ethical violations, the $400 million Qatari jet, and on and on and on. So we have so many examples now. We've realized how many gaps there are in the Constitution. Look, it's a 200-plus-year-old document. So we've got to create a committee of people to sit down and look at what our exposure is over the last 10 years in particular, ensure we write the laws. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we've got to start passing some amendments that sit above our everyday laws, because we have such a lawless Supreme Court that they will strike down laws that were passed in a bipartisan manner. So yes, absolutely, we have to relook at everything.
Well, thank you. So if you each just take a minute maybe to just refresh people how to find your website, and we'll start with you, Dakarai, since you were and then Everett last. So Dakarai.
Well, firstly, thank you all so much for spending the evening with us and engaging with us. And we know it's a hard ask to ask you to come back out for a midterm runoff primary, but it's so important, y'all. So June 16th is the day. And again, I'm asking for your prayers, your support, and your vote. Learn more about my campaign at Dakarai.Larriett.com. And I will be barnstorming the state for the next 10 days. So please click on the events section to see where I will be. It's kind of a Where's Waldo, and I cannot wait to meet you. Too much is at stake. We've got to have a fighter in place that can carry the mantle to November, who can represent your values, represent your ethics, a lifelong Democrat. Thank you.
Thank you, Dakarai. Everett.
I've been a Democrat in this state for more than 30 years before Dakarai was able to vote in this country, in the state. But the difference is, I graduated from college and I worked in this state all of my career. I worked in Huntsville, Alabama, then I moved to Birmingham, began working with Bell South, and then I opened up my own practice and I began practicing law in the state of Alabama. I am the candidate who has been here over the last 20 years plus. I know Alabama. I've lived in Alabama. I've worked in Alabama. I understand Alabamians. I'm not just coming here just to run for U.S. Senate. I've been here. I ask you to be there for me. Let's go out on June the 16th and vote Everett Wess, the best candidate for United States Senate. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you both for spending this rapid fire thing. And again,
Rapid fire, yes.
Yeah. We
fun.
touched on a few issues, and there's like 20 that came in on the chat that we didn't even get to. So hopefully some of those will find their way to you. We wish you both good luck and thanks for running. It takes guts to run. And on behalf of Birmingham Indivisible, we hope to do more of these kind of things, and we want to be a positive part of the political process. And goodness knows Alabama needs all of us who want to improve Alabama to work at it. So thank you all for joining us on the YouTube tonight. And thanks to our two candidates. And good luck next Tuesday.
Thank you, Chris and Debbie.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Good night.
Thanks for coming. We
All right.
really appreciated hearing your thoughts.